Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, as I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. I received an email from Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this program. And she asked me the question, are you going to address the assassination of Charlie Kirk tomorrow? This came, of course, yesterday. And of course, I responded, of course I am. And I want to do so in the context of something that I've never forgotten. Some of you will remember the great newsman, Alexander Kendrick. He was the biographer of Edward R. Murrow, among other things. But he wrote a book. He wrote a book in 1974 called The Wound Within. And his explanation for using that was a quote from an English author from the 16th century. The wound that bleedeth inward is most dangerous. And that is precisely what I want to suggest to you today. The murder of Charlie Kirk leaves a gaping hole in all of our hearts. It is true that Charlie Kirk was a conservative activist. It is true that many of us agreed with him on issues and many of us disagreed with him on issues. But one of the key things that I think we must understand is what was pointed out years ago in the book that I've just referred to. And this is the language that the author used. A climate of fear, suspicion, uncertainty, political demagoguery, and public spectacle bred the virus that struck America. It grew through indifference, ignorance, moral righteousness, unwillingness to confess error, and other human faults, notably arrogance. When I read these words by Alexander Kendrick, I thought to myself, it really is true that what has happened to us in America, summed up in the title of this book, is the wound within. Let's talk about violence in America. Many years ago, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Robert Donovan, a great reporter, also of the Murrow tradition, wrote a book about the assassins. And he described in it the assassinations and near assassinations of America's presidents. In it, he suggested that there was something in America that bred violence. Let me be clear. Many of us went to see the play Hamilton, and we now know that the duel between Hamilton and Burr, a seminal moment in American politics, was an act of violence. We know further that throughout our history, we have witnessed acts of violence, and for those of us of a certain age, we remember where we were November 22nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy was killed. And we remember the rest of the 1960s. Yes, we remember the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. And we remember the impact that those events had on all of our lives. There is no word that I can utter which will heal the wound of yesterday. We must all commit ourselves very clearly to the fact that we must heal that wound within. We have to work together, liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, all Americans, to make sure that this stream of violence no longer infects our society. But here's the simple truth. Charlie Kirk opposed any gun control. And I must tell you, I have always favored gun control. I don't know if gun control would have spared Charlie Kirk's life, but I do know that many lives might have been spared if we had tighter control over guns in America. I know there are many of you who will disagree with me and who will say, oh, John, the gun isn't responsible, it's the shooter. And I had somebody actually yesterday say to me, let's deal with mental health issues. I am in favor of dealing with mental health issues, but I do know that when you have a gun, you have the ability to execute immediately a plan. Look, we remember Sandy Hook. We remember mass shootings. But let us also be clear that someone like Charlie Kirk was a force in America. Not only was he close to Donald Trump, but we are now told, and many of us were aware of it, that his influence in the nomination of J.D. Vance to be Vice President of the United States was considerable. Charlie Kirk was trusted by the Trump family, and Donald Jr., who was a major backer of Vice President Vance, pushed Vance forward on the basis of that trust. Now, I want to remind you of something. Before he was a United States Senator, J.D. Vance referred to Trump as a potential American Hitler. And yet, Charlie Kirk, and in the end, the Trump family, came to trust J.D. Vance because they understood that rhetoric was one thing, but dealing with real life is another thing. I'm no defender of many of Charlie Kirk's views, but I will tell you that the wound inflicted because of the death of Charlie Kirk is one which we will feel for years to come. Because Charlie Kirk, with all of his views, will now become something of a martyr. And I am reminded that when George Wallace was shot in 1972 in Maryland, many of us who understood that George Wallace in those days was a racist, and yet, in the end, as we know, when George Wallace ran for re-election as governor of Alabama, a majority of African Americans voted for him. The wound within can be healed if we work together. We cannot ameliorate, we cannot erase the action of political assassins. We can argue strenuously, Democrats, Republicans, all Americans, that violence in American society must stop. Not only violence against political leaders, but violence against the innocents, the youth, the school shootings. So this morning, as Gogo Zoger asked me to do, I want to talk with you frankly and candidly about what we can do collectively to heal the wound. Remember that quote, "The wound that bleedeth inward is most dangerous." And is that where we want to be as a country? Don't we want to heal that wound? I had planned this morning to talk about September 11th and the aftermath on this anniversary of that dastardly deed. And there were many things that I could have talked about, but I wanted this morning to open with Charlie Kirk. And I hope all of us will reflect on the fact that that wound within needs to be addressed, corrected, and healed. Those are my thoughts today. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. You can interact with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and, of course, through direct email, as many of you do. And to Gogo Zoger, I hope I've addressed what you wanted me to address, Gogo, and I hope I've done it, inadequately though it may be, in a direct and candid fashion. I am John Rothman, and you are listening to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I hope the news tomorrow is better. See you then.